Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Sunday, October 22nd. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Wisconsin game is in 6 days. The game against Michigan in 34 days. Buckeyes will be headed up to Madison with an unbeaten record. Joined by Kevin Noon of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Kevin, the Buckeyes, we came into the season thinking, boy, that road game against Notre Dame is going to be a real test. And they escaped it by that much, but they escaped it. They got out with a win. And we thought, okay, well now, boy, that Penn State game is going to be a real test. This one it wasn't beautiful. It wasn't a work of art, but man, it was also not a game where you felt like they were in any real serious danger in the second half.
I believe a former coach here used the term rock fight, and it was very much a rock fight, and not even nice smooth rocks. These were really jagged and not aerodynamic and just very clumsy, and I think they were dropped a couple times. But yeah, Ohio State certainly had its moments on offense of where it didn't look like it was ever going to get anything going, but Ohio State's defense kept Penn State very much in check, and Penn State, put up a late touchdown that really is inconsequential for anything other than those compulsive gamblers out there, and I don't even know necessarily what they were going to gain out of it, but a big win for Ohio State, and now we will sit there and talk about all the pitfalls that are in all the rest of the games, because we certainly have not seen a finished product from the offense, but damn, that defense is looking good.
Yeah, this was, you mentioned a former Ohio State coach, and boy, this was a Jim Tressel-era performance from this team. Now, people will hear that and think that that's a negative. Ohio State won a whole heck of a lot of football games when Jim Tressel was the coach at Ohio State, and his best season, they won a lot of games that looked a lot like this, where, Ohio State wins 20-12, but it was not 20-12. It was 10-6 at the end of the third quarter. And then the Buckeyes put up 10 points, kind of pull away, 20-6, and then Penn State goes on a kind of last-minute drive off of against the prevent defense. So really, when the game was in any serious doubt, it was 20-6 Ohio State. And boy, oh boy, for the defense to play like that against a Penn State offense that's not great. They don't have, when we've talked to death about the fact that they were not a big play offense by any means, but they were efficient. And for Ohio State to do that without Denzel Burke out there, their best corner, they dominated that game. I could not be more impressed with how that defense played.
Penn State at the end of the game was held to 49 yards rushing, but if you look early in the game, Penn State had some success running the ball. Drew Allar looked all out of sorts. Ohio State really was able to lock down Penn State. There wasn't a Jahan Dotson on this team. Keandre Lambert-Smith got dinged up in the game. I don't really remember if he came back, because somebody's nodding saying yes, but the offense for Penn State, the pass offense was so bad that it really didn't matter. We never really focused on anybody. I think the only person I ever focused in on was Tyler Warren, the tight end who wears a fullback type of number at 44. So Ohio State really was able to kind of impose its will there. I'm still going to question probably for a while why earlier in the game Penn State did not ride the running game a little bit more, but that had kind of been something that we'd seen all season. For having backs like Singleton and Allen, they weren't getting those big types of games. And I think we can sit there and try and draw some parallels to maybe what Penn State did against Iowa, another great defensive team among the nation's best. But the ways that those games played out ended up being very different.
Yeah, and Nick Singleton had back-to-back rushes of 20 yards and 16 yards, and then Penn State immediately went back to the pass. Dreweller gets sacked. Dreweller throws an incomplete pass. Nick Singleton runs for 6 yards on 3rd and 13, and they kick a field goal. That's 3 rushes for 42 yards right there for Nick Singleton. The rest of the game for Penn State, they had 23 rushes for 7 yards. You got to ride your hot hand there. But boy, for Ohio State to lock down this is a decent Penn State team. This is not. It's a good Penn State team, but this is a Penn State team that has a good offensive line. This is a Penn State team that has talented running backs. That was a defensive performance you have not seen from Ohio State in quite a while.
I went into the game saying that Ohio State was the better team. Penn State had better line play. Well, for everything that I said about Penn State's offensive line, Ohio State's defense just did a great job of getting up in their business and really imposing its will. And while the sacks were not, this wasn't a 6-sack type of game for Ohio State, but they really had Drew Allar with the yips for much of the game. He was having to duck and dive and dodge throughout everything. And it just really kind of seemed like there was just a point, even in the first half, where it's like, he doesn't got it today. He doesn't have it, and it's just not going to happen. And then at that point, you just have to kind of insulate yourself from the dumb plays. And I think that, we can kind of talk about how the first half ended. Ohio State gets the ball with 40-some seconds left, and they just take a knee. That's the only way Penn State's been able to beat Ohio State as of late, are a couple of crazy plays. I mean, obviously, the blocked field goal in Happy Valley. And then I think if you go back to one of the other previous wins by Penn State, it was when Terrell Pryor was going around the end, only needed to pick up a yard, and the ball got punched out. But if he would have been able to make that one guy missed, he's still running at this point. All of these years later, he's still running.
That was 2008, and I think they lost that game 10-6 or something like that, 13-6, something along those lines. The Ohio State defense definitely did throw a wrench into Penn State's offensive game plan. If you can't run, you can't throw, you run out of options pretty quickly. Ohio State, they stuck with the run. To their credit, they stuck with the run. 41 carries for Ohio State, 79 yards, 1.9 yards per carry. And there's a couple sacks in there, but not enough. Mayan Williams, 24 carries, 62 yards. Chip Trainum, 9 carries, 22 yards. Devin Brown, 2 carries, 5 yards, and then sprained his ankle. Xavier Johnson, 2 carries, 4 yards. Just not. They couldn't get it done couldn't get it going on the ground, but the pass pro was decent. This felt like it was not a incredible effort by the offensive line by any means, but when you go back to what this team looked like against Indiana, you can see clear signs of progress on that line.
I mean, on one poll you have fantastic game. On another poll you have absolute liability. They've moved out of that absolute liability range. They have not gotten to that great game poll at this point, but I think that they are making progress. There were a couple of offensive line penalties, one of them on Josh Simmons, questionable. I'm not here to debate it. It doesn't really matter at this point whether or not the Big Ten office sends Ryan Day an apology on that one. I think there are probably some other plays that will be talked about a little bit more, but I think that the line play is getting better in terms certainly of pass pro. Early in the game, not that Ohio State necessarily had a lot of big runs, but it did seem like they were getting a push. And then maybe there's a little bit of a reversion back to what we'd seen before, but I think also at that point, Penn State really kind of had to sell out against the run and was like, we're not going to let that happen. A lot of first down runs that were getting blown up in the backfield, things that you don't want to see, but it is what it is.
Yeah, well, and this felt also like a game where Ohio State you got the sense the Ohio State coaching staff was looking at it and saying, I don't think Penn State's going to score 20 points today, so you don't need more than 20 points today. And when it was 10-6, they were kind of managing the game to, it wasn't like they were desperate to build on the lead. It was a much more conservative game plan than we've seen. And part of that is probably faith in the defense. Part of that is Kyle McCord was good but not great. And it felt a little bit like just don't make the big mistake was kind of part of the game plan in the second half. But he finishes 22 of 35, 286 yards, a touchdown, 63% completion. He was. I mean, for Ohio State to do, the running game without Travion Henderson, he missed the whole game. The passing game without Emeka Ibuka, the defense without Denzel Burke. You're missing 3 of your big name players on both sides of the ball, and you still win pretty comfortably. I mean, for Kyle McCord, how would you grade Kyle McCord's performance in that game?
That's a good question because I'd work my way up to just something. And I want to get this one out first to give Tony a shout out. In the third quarter, I said, I don't think 10 points is going to be enough to win this game. And he said, well, I think 13 might. And he was proven to be correct, as much as that pains me to say. But as for McCord, I don't know, because he almost threw for 300 yards. And, of course, we know that getting all hung up on total yardage or anything like that is a fool's errand. He had some good, he had some bad, blah, 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 the facts of life. I don't know. I think B-. I don't know. And I don't know if I'm being an unfair grader one way or the other, but that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, it was an up and down performance where he started hot and then missed a bunch of throws in a row and then finished pretty well. And, when you're looking at him compared to Drew Aller, I came into this game thinking, which quarterback is going to make the play or make the bad play? And I picked Ohio State to win based on the fact that I thought Kyle McCord was going to outplay Drew Aller, and he did. I mean, Kyle McCord has an extra year in college. Kyle McCord is playing at home. Kyle McCord has better receivers. So it all kind of makes sense that would happen, but he did it. He did what he needed to do. But boy, having Marvin Harrison doesn't hurt. 16 targets for Marvin Harrison, which is a lot, but also maybe not enough. 11 catches, 162 yards, a touchdown. He had the game-sealing touchdown that made it 20-6 late. You run out of ways at some point to say, hey, Marvin Harrison, good at football.
Especially when you don't have Emeka Egbuka out there, so you're kind of having a little bit of a platoon situation between Xavier Johnson and Carnell Tate out there, and it's not taking anything away from either of those guys. Neither of them are Emeka Egbuka at this point. So you have Marvin Harrison, and you target him right about 1 out of every 3 pass attempt that you have there, and I think that's fair if he's available. If you don't want to force it in, and we're talking about a quarterback in Kyle McCord who's thrown 1 interception this season, so he's not somebody who is really trying to fit the ball into the tightest of windows. I don't have a problem with that, and actually, that's 11 receptions. He had 16 targets, so I mean we're well above 1 out of 3 at that point. So no, I think you've got to go to him until somebody takes him away. And that's why it's so important for Ohio State to have Emeka Egbuka out there. And I think once Ohio State gets to the end of November, try and make sure you have that third target, whether or not it's Cade Stover, who had a fantastic game, or whatever's going to go on there, because we saw kind of what happened against Georgia last year. And once Ohio State lost Marvin Harrison and only had Emeka Egbuka and everything else, it became a lot easier to just bracket somebody and say, we'll take our chances elsewhere.
Well, and one thing that I think gets lost a lot in that conversation about the Peach Bowl last year is, they lost Marvin Harrison, but do you remember who they lost in the first half of that game?
They lost their tight end.
Cade Stover. Well, they had Cade Stover on Saturday against Penn State, and Cade Stover only got thrown the ball 4 times, and he caught all 4 of those passes, including one that was, I don't know how he caught it, went up and took it away from the defensive back.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a very much a no, yes pass by Kyle McCord. But Cade Stover, I mean, last week against Purdue, there was one where he caught a touchdown. I think the first touchdown he caught, it was like behind him, and it was like, oh no, that's a bad throw. Oh, no, he caught it. Turns out it was a good throw. 4 catches, 70 yards, long of 30. He's just been turned into such a reliable target for Kyle McCord. And it's not like a safety blanket where he's just a check down guy. He's getting open. This is, how many times have we seen him where he catches it 8 yards downfield and then turns it into a 25 or 30-yard gain? It feels like that happens once a week at this point.
He's a legitimate threat. He is not that check down. He is not that guy. It's like, there's nothing there. I'm going to take my 4 yards and try and stay ahead of the chains at this point. He is a legitimate weapon in the offense. During the post-game show, obviously, we talked a little bit about the year of the tight end, but Cade Stover is well on his way to putting in some records in the record book in terms of tight end production, especially here in this quote-unquote modern era of college football.
And Ohio State was doing all of this against what is pretty universally regarded as a good Penn State defense. This is, Penn State's offense, I think we came into the week looking and going, you got some questions with the big plays. You got some, you're not hitting big plays in the ground. You're not hitting big plays in the air. So, like, how exactly is this going to work? And the defensive side of the ball, I don't think there were really any questions. The defensive side of the ball was just consistently very good. I think they were number 1 in scoring defense in the nation, and they haven't faced great competition, but
neither is the other team that's in the top 2 either.
Yeah, lots of other teams have not played great competition, and they're not number 1 in the nation. So to do this against that Penn State defense, this is real tangible signs of progress. And while I don't think that Ohio State is right now where they need to be, let's hypothetically say 2 days after Thanksgiving, give or take, they certainly feel like they're on track to maybe get to where they need to be to at least have that be a 4-quarter very good competitive game, and then who knows, maybe more than that.
Exactly, and I think Ohio State certainly benefited from a couple of things. I think that Ohio State benefited from Penn State losing Chop Robinson in the game, even though I feel that the other end, Adisa, I think is his last name.
Adisa Isaac, yeah.
That's it, yeah. I felt that he had maybe a little bit more production. I felt that Ohio State really had an opportunity against the Penn State secondary, which I didn't feel it had been really tested that much this year. To Penn State's credit, I felt that they were able to limit some of the big plays, but then you still look and see that Cal McCord threw for 286, but he only had the 1 touchdown pass. Ohio State kind of still once again bogged down in the red zone, but we're seeing things get put together, and for Ohio State to be able to do that against Notre Dame, to be able to do that against Penn State, I think all of that is important. And of course, people are going to quickly turn their attention to Wisconsin and, Luke Fickell's got all their secrets. Well, Luke Fickell hasn't been around for a couple years. Luke Fickell has not been around for the current incarnation of how a lot of things are working at this point. So I think Ohio State's defense really, I go back to a point that I made upon the hiring of Jim Knowles. It took Jim Knowles 3 years to turn around Oklahoma State. I told people, do not throw the baby out with the bathwater after year 1. This is going to be at least a 2-year process, probably 3 years. And here we are at a little bit more than 1.5 years, and this defense is really rounded into one of the nation's best. And of course, people are going to say, yeah, but how would this go against Georgia? Well, Georgia's without Brock Bowers right now for quite some time. How would this go against Alabama? I don't know. Alabama's really kind of dragged its feet against Tennessee early in that game. I do know that around the time that we're recording this, Alabama had taken the lead. But I think that this defense is showing that it has certainly has the chops to be able to hang with the best in the nation.
Oh boy, Alabama sure did take the lead. Holy smokes, that is quite a second half. The Tide rolling, but the Tide also has a loss, and the Tide also will, even if they keep rolling, have to play Georgia in the SEC championship game. So, and the Buckeyes, they are rolling too, undefeated, 7-0, now headed into Madison, and now you're at the point of the year where now you can kind of remember the schedule without having to really even think about it. Madison, Rutgers, and Michigan State, and Minnesota, and then who to wrap up the regular season. Like the fact that you were kind of moving your eyes like you were thinking about who's who. Well,
I knew exactly who it was. Who. I should have been throwing faces at the camera and not at Tom Orr.
Who. Who is in 34 days.
Well, I mean, it was one of those things that I didn't want them to steal my clients. They've stolen everything else.
So who is in 34 days. Wisconsin in 6 days. We will be there for both of those. We'll be there for what should be a very eventful week for Ohio State football, as they now have Penn State in the rearview mirror. Also a very, very big recruiting week for the Buckeyes. A lot of visitors in the Horseshoe on Saturday to see that win over Penn State. Should be, you probably got a couple guys on potential commitment watch. You had a 5-star Alabama wide receiver, Jamie French, in the stadium to watch that game and watch Marvin Harrison just absolutely blow up like Vesuvius. That probably can't hurt. And there should be plenty of stuff to talk about on the recruiting front, plenty of stuff to talk about on the X's and O's front with Ross Fulton a little later on in the week, plenty of stuff to talk about on the team front as the Buckeyes improved to 7-0 with a 20-12 win over Penn State. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.